What's up everybody, it's RobinGaming here. So it's been quite a while since I've been in front of the camera. If you're wondering what I've been up to these last few weeks, I've been working on a massive top 50 PlayStation 4 games video that's going to be about close to an hour long. So look forward to that. But for now, let's actually get into Days Gone, which is of course the topic of this video. Because last week I traveled to Belgium, where I went to a specific event that Sony invited me to play 3 hours of the game. I went there together with my girlfriend and with another friend of mine, and it was a pretty cool setup because we didn't just get to play through, 3 hours of the game. They also had prepared some outdoor activities for us. It took place at this sort of like fortress. And so all those activities were kind of like in line with the setting of the game. I got to drive a buggy around outside, put some climbing gear on and go down a zip line. So that was all really cool and, well set up, I guess. So I really, I enjoyed it. Did catch a cold, I think, there. So I actually recovered from that in the last week, and I still slightly am. Maybe you can hear it in my voice. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was cool. But obviously it's all about playing the game, and that's what you want to hear about, is my thoughts on the game. Now, before we dive into that, I think it's important to point out my feelings about Days Gone going into this event, because if you've been watching my videos over the last couple of years, you might know that I had always been a little bit skeptical about Days Gone, right? And I think that's really what you saw out there online as well, is there were sort of like two divided camps about the game. Some people were skeptical and some people were really excited about it. Now, I think, both camps had a reason for the way they felt, right? Is that basically, if you were skeptical about the game, well, the way I myself looked at it was that what I had seen at E3 and in all the demos, and the fact, of course, that they were even absent at the last E3 in 2018, but then again, those demos had always looked a little bit rough and unfinished. At the same time, I look at the studio behind the game, which is Sony Bend, a relatively, I think, smaller studio than most Sony games out there, and also inexperienced in the way that they haven't made a AAA console title, I think, for over a decade. Now, I enjoyed Uncharted Golden Abyss, but still, it is to be expected that if you're gonna make, a AAA game that should be on par with what we now expect from console games out there, that you're not immediately gonna knock it out of the park, right? So I was a bit skeptical about the game. At the same time, a lot of people were excited, mainly based on the fact that this is still a Sony game. It has the name or PlayStation on it, right? So you expect something amazing from that, and rightfully so, because just look at all the games that Sony has been making in the last couple of years, and yeah, there's reason to be excited. Now, that's what I mean, is that I am super excited about 99% of the games that Sony comes out with, but I at the same time have to be completely honest with you all. And while what I played of Days Gone was by no means terrible or bad or whatever, it also didn't stand out, and it was actually pretty average / your run-of-the-mill Ubisoft open world game, maybe even below average. Sadly, it is just not on par with the standard that Sony has set by themselves. And that doesn't have to be a terrible thing. I'm sure there will be people that are going to be enjoying Days Gone, because there are still a lot of people that enjoy all the, open world games that come out nowadays by companies like Ubisoft. But I can only speak for myself. I can only speak for me personally, in that I've been avoiding the Assassin's Creed releases and the new Far Cry's, because those games, to me right now, are the same thing over and over again. I just don't get excited for them anymore. And so saying that I'm excited for Days Gone would be a step too far. I think the way I've been looking at it in these last few years was justified. And again, that's just the reality of the situation, and I have to be honest about you with that. But let's actually get into some specifics, I guess, because that Days Gone is a game of lesser production values compared to many other games out there basically becomes clear from the very beginning. What do I mean by that? Well, Sony has set certain standards for themselves in the way that their games do storytelling. For example, if you play Uncharted right now, say you transition from gameplay into a cutscene, right? Then the camera angle will basically change and you're right into the cutscene. The Order did that as well 4 years ago already, where it smoothly made you transition into cutscenes. God of War did an even more amazing job, where it was one continuous camera shot. So every single time, like, you'd all of a sudden just lose control and you'd basically be watching a story moment play out. Well, Days Gone is very old-fashioned in that way, in which you actually drive up to a certain part and all of a sudden you'll notice, oh, there's a small like black fade out basically. You wait a bit, it fades back in. It's these kind of situations where you just feel like, oh, it's becomes noticeable from the very beginning, from the start, that it's kind of outdated in these ways. There's also, for example, certain nests with freakers in them. You're supposed to throw a Molotov at it, and then the freakers will come running out of them. You're supposed to kill them. Well, they don't actually run out of those nests. They literally sort of like spawn/transition out of the nests. So all these small ways, presentation-wise, immediately make it visible that this is a game of lesser production values. Now, as far as the story goes, like I said, that's one of the at least somewhat redeeming aspects in which it's still trying to be a Sony game, because there are quite a lot of cutscenes in there. Played a 3-hour demo, I think about 20 minutes of those, maybe even more than that, was watching cutscenes, so that was cool. Sadly, not all of it is that engaging. I thought the opening was pretty abrupt. This story in itself, I won't spoil much about it, by the way, but this story in itself is, of course, about Deacon and his wife, Sarah, who he's lost. He assumes to be dead. Basically, the goal seems to be that there may be clues that Sarah could still be alive. That gives him sort of a motivation to go through everything in the game, which makes sense. He's in the apocalypse, right? So the fact that his wife could still be alive, like, that's a good motivation, I guess, to do all the things that he does in the game, but it's not exactly original either. Then again, there are certain scenes in there. For example, there's a flashback, somewhat midway through the demo, I think. There was a flashback scene that I actually have footage of that I can show you, where he comes across Sarah for the first time. It's them meeting for the first time, and it's literally the most typical cliche encounter where, like, her car is broken down, she needs help or whatever. He comes across her, he needs directions, they get into a conversation. It's kind of awkward and weird and like, there's a lot of like silences and stuff. It's just not that engaging. Take a look for yourself.
Hey.
Hey.
So I'm sort of lost. I was hoping you could help me out.
I'm sorry, you're lost?
Yeah, I'm looking for the old Belknap Road, and there's not a lot of signs around here.
You gotta be kidding me.
Nope.
What? What is it? What? It's great. That is just perfect. That is great. That is great.
So about those directions?
Now, Deacon as a character is also very similar in the way that, he ranges from mostly alright to sometimes being downright strange. Like, there are certain voice delivery lines that when you kill a freaker that are simply ridiculous.
Huh? You like stabbing him in the back, huh? That right? You like this?
But like I said, I think this gives you a good impression of what my problems with the story so far are, but I can't really judge it too well yet, simply based on the fact that I, only played 3 hours, right? So I didn't have a whole lot of, story scenes that I've seen yet. The Deacon and Sarah thing seems to, like I said, be sort of like the main thing. You also come across some other characters out there, but once again, I found it hard to really be super engaged with all those interactions that I had, but we'll have to wait and see for when the game comes out. Now, when we get to the gameplay, last time with the God of War event, what I did is that I actually talked about the controls. People seem to really like that because they wanted to get a sense of how the game plays. So I think I'll do the same thing with Days Gone. I actually wrote down what the control scheme is. L2, it's way more traditional and typical to most other games out there, of course. But with L2, you aim the gun. With R2, you fire the gun, of course. If you are not aiming down, then the R2 button will be used for melee. So Deacon will automatically, like, you know, use his knife or whatever melee weapon you have equipped to kill his enemies. L1 brings up the weapon and equipment wheel, where you can select your guns, or you can select a Molotov or some other equipment that you have. R1 is for rolling. It's a bit strange as well. Sometimes there are these purely melee encounters, and so basically all you're doing is pressing R1 to roll and then R2 to like swing your bat or whatever. It doesn't exactly feel great, but that's basically how the melee system works. So with square you reload your gun, of course. You can also interact, so pick up objects from the ground or talk to people or whatever. Triangle you use for a stealth kill. Circle is to go into crouch mode. There's also cover, you can take cover in the game. X is to jump. L3 is to run, R3 is to go into this sort of like inspector mode, I guess tracking vision, eagle vision from all the, you know, many open world games that you've probably played. That's not exactly new, and sometimes, you know, you therefore had to like see exactly where somebody you were looking for went, so you just track them down basically by using that mode. The arrow keys you can also use either to heal yourself, I think to turn a flashlight on or whatever, and to equip some other stuff. I'm not binoculars, actually. You can mark enemies as well. So that's what you use that for. But, you know, even gameplay-wise, the shooting doesn't really feel precise. The AI is bad. Like, there was a certain part, I think I have footage for that too, where, you know, you have to try and like make your way up a tower or whatever. Well, there's an enemy on the tower, which I was trying to snipe down. Literally, like, I was trying to snipe the enemy. I had my crosshairs on the enemy. It wouldn't hit him at all. And that was probably for the reason that the game wanted me to go up on the tower, because once I got up on the tower, turns out there were more enemies there, just sort of like hiding behind cover, and they didn't really know what they were doing at all. I've had many situations in the game like that, where the enemies just have the weirdest behavior. At one point, I was supposed to chase someone down. Well, I actually was able to literally catch up with him. I was standing right next to him, but that was not supposed to happen. I was supposed to actually chase him down to a certain point where a cutscene would start. In fact, but what did happen is I completely caught up to him, and I think he got scared of some freako randomly or whatever, so he was just in this awkward animation where he didn't know what to do, and I just had to wait literally for him to get out of that animation and start running again, so I could chase him down to get to the point where I was supposed to be. Same kind of counts for the driving, which, because the game is an open world game, it doesn't really matter too much that the driving is not super precise, right? Because mostly it's just open areas and stuff. Sometimes you have to drive through some smaller ports with objects in there, and then I found myself and also my friends who played the game a bit, you know, bump into objects quite often. One of the things I was actually surprised by, it's a small detail, but I still thought it was cool, is that the game, finally, there's another game using the touchpad for a good reason, which is that normally if you bring up your options or whatever, you have 4 different sort of like things you can go into. You can either open a map, your, I think it's your inventory or something, your skills, your story progress. And so what this game does is actually you can simply make a swipe movement and immediately be into one of those 4, you know, one of the four options that you want to go into. So that's a good thing, you know, for sure. The graphics also are good. Like, the graphics, the game looks good, especially in cutscenes. There's nothing to complain about here. So as far as that goes, you know, I was satisfied with the way the game looked and stuff. But overall, you can just tell in the production values of everything that this isn't the most outstanding game. That it is very comparable to, like I said, your typical run-of-the-mill Ubisoft open world game or whatever. In every small way, Days Gone shows to you that it's not quite at that level that you're used to from a Sony exclusive. And, you know, I would love to tell you all that I was super excited about the game, but, you know, it's just not the case, and I have to be honest with you all about that, right? It's like, I will be playing it, and I'm still, you know, I hope that the story can do something that right now I don't see it, you know, being able to do, but that would be cool, right? You know, again, I'm interested to see what the story is heading for, but at the end of the day, I'm not the most excited for Days Gone. It feels sort of like a, small little snack in between, I guess, while we're waiting for the heavy hitters, while we're waiting for the Death Strandings and Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima, those are going to be the real Sony games to look forward to. Days Gone is kind of like that game in between, while we're waiting for those other ones. Now, one of the areas that I will still quickly get into that in which Days Gone could stand out, that is unique about it, is of course the Hordes. We saw this from the very beginning at the E3 demo, is that was something impressive that you don't see other games do, is there was this massive horde of freakers, many of them on your screen and stuff, and I was wondering what that was going to be like in the game itself. Now, I did come across 2 hordes in the 3-hour demo that I played, but I didn't actually get to deal with them myself. They just sort of like passed by or whatever, and that was all the interaction I had with them. So I am curious to find out, if that is cool, if that's something that's a little redeeming for the game in which it could actually stand out. But we'll have to wait and see about that. I know we'll also say, last of all, that the game ran steady at about, 30 frames per second. I did play on the PS4 Pro, so I'm not sure exactly how it will pan out on the regular PS4. But like I said, with me playing it on the Pro, the game played smooth, so at least that was good. But overall, I think I've really said it all. Like, honestly, there's not a whole lot to touch upon and to really like go in depth about, because this is your usual open world game. You're dealing with freakers this time. Yeah, I mean, look at the gameplay. There will be plenty of other previews out there that are actually gonna like dive into the specifics and stuff. So check that out if you want to, of course. I wanted to give you more of a general consensus about my experience playing it. So while I thought that the Sony event itself was cool, was arranged well, and I met some cool people, and I still, had a cool time, I guess, playing the game. I wasn't exactly impressed. And that's a shame, because I'm usually impressed with almost every single Sony game that comes out, because they make amazing stuff. It's sort of like the problem they've created by themselves, which is not a problem in the slightest, but they've put the bar so high. And like, Sony is the company out there right now that's making the games that actually make me excited about games right now. Because I look at the Activisions and the Ubisofts and the EAs, they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and I've sort of lost interest in all those games that they've been coming out with over the last couple of years. And Days Gone kind of like just fits that certain mold, right? And that's, I guess, my biggest problem with it. But overall, those are my impressions. Let me know what you thought in the comments, of course. Let me know if you're still looking forward to Days Gone, or if you're planning on getting the game. And then for now, hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to my top 50 PlayStation 4 games video that's coming out very soon. That will definitely be something to look forward to. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you a lot for watching, and hope to see you again next time.